Please like and leave a heart. Please.
There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vitor Locksmith Show. I'm your host, David Gibson, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview, one technical presentation, and one technical screw-up at a time. So if we do have a technical screw-up, guys, please let me know what it is. Just like the oil field, we'll see what it is, get it solved, get it fixed, and get the show rolling again. Please let me know where you're watching from. Love to be able to give you guys a shout-out here on the show. So thankful to have you guys here with us. It's on another amazing Friday. We do not have a sponsor for today's show, but we will next week. So look forward to working with the guys at Rig Reports and MI4. So excited to have them on board and be sponsoring the show. Even though they're not the sponsor for today's show, no problem with being able to give them a shout out. We will still be giving away one of our 3D printed Gibson Reports drill bits. So love to be able to have it. All you got to do this time, you don't have to put any hashtags or anything like that. Just type something into the comment section and essentially you get entered in. So that's all you got to do. Just do the little cat thing, just boop, 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 and hit the enter button, and then you'll be good to go. So let's see here. We've got Ian Purse tuning in this week. Says hello from Woodlands, Texas. Thanks for being here, sir. John is tuning in from San Antonio. Got to meet him last week at NAPE. Great opportunity there. Ian is saying, I can see you clearly today. Did have a little bit of an issue last week. Not really sure what that was. Just turned some things off, turned them back on, and got to working again. So good to know that it's working. Mr. Tony Evans tuning in from Petal, Mississippi. Not a location that's typically watching the show. So thanks for being here, sir. We do appreciate it. And then we got Mr. Oh, here we go. Mr. Nate LaRue. Come on out to our happy hour for the Oilfield Helping Hands on February 20th. Crawfish and crude cook-off on March 7th in the DFW area. Yeah. Maybe we can give there we go. Talal, something. See, that's all you got to do to get entered. And Talal is going to be our sponsor next week. So yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, sir. Do appreciate it. Ian tuning in from Houston, Texas. Thanks for being here as well, sir. All right. Without further ado, then we will go ahead and get the show started. We got two amazing guests today. Not quite oil field stuff, but very oil field related. So we'd like to be able to welcome to the show somebody who I've been trying to get on the show for quite some time, but he couldn't do it alone. So Mr. Tony Pink and Taylor Mattie, Taylor and Tony TNT for the show today. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
All right, guys. All right. So for those that don't know who you guys are, can you each give me a little background on who you are and what got you to this point of being on my show?
Cool. Taylor, you go first. Go on then.
No, age first, please, Tony.
Okay, I'm the resident old bastard on the call. Yeah. So I was 17 years with Schlumberger, 16 years with NOV, took early retirement last year, and dived into geothermal. So I actually, the day I retired, I was at Geothermal Rising conference in Nevada, and a lady called Tara Rogers came up and said, "Did I hear you retired?" And I went, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, I've got a job for you this evening." Yeah. So it was literally at a cocktail party that I'd left. So I've been in geothermal over in NOV and then in personally for the last 5 years. And, it's great to be on this show because, this is a great opportunity for those whose business is a hole in the ground. Yeah. We are hole in the ground people, and geothermal needs as many, if not more, holes in the ground than oil and gas. So great to be here, Dave. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, Taylor, yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a petroleum engineer by trade. I was born and raised in oil and gas, and I came from Pennsylvania in the heart of the shale revolution. So it's part of me. But I've been working for Baker Hughes for about 7-8 years until I came over to where I'm at now with Project InnerSpace. And the goal is trying to help oil and gas learn about geothermal because the parallels are there. You know, they're like estranged siblings, and it's holes in the ground, it's drill baby drill. And so I made that transition a couple of years ago, and I haven't regretted it. I mean, it's a lot of fun, a lot of great challenges too.
All right. Well, then let's jump off in this. Can you guys give us, I guess, what are some of the first things that you guys learned, obviously coming from oil and gas, that surprised you now that you're in the geothermal space? Something that might surprise some of the other oil and gas viewers out there.
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, because the biggest thing that jumped out to me, and it's like when I went out to the Permian Basin in about 2006, 2007, and people told me, "Oh, this rock is really hard. We can't drill this fast." Yeah, and everyone was saying that in geothermal, and over the last 2 years, we have gone from 25 feet an hour in granite basement to 100 foot an hour and 3,000 foot runs. Yeah. So this sort of feeling that everyone in oil and gas had, that we're just not going to get economic rates of penetration in geothermal, has yet again we've proved that we put technology, expertise, decent engineering onto this, and we solve some of the toughest problems. And that rate of penetration has been passed from the Forge project, from the Frontier Observatory and Research for Geothermal Energy, passed to a commercial company called Fervo, and Fervo are out doing what they say on the tin, and they've dropped their well time down to drilling sort of to 13,000 feet in granite in 20 odd days. So that was such a surprise to me, and that's such a message to get out there, that it isn't as difficult as people think. And we can talk about temperature management later on in the show. But yeah, cool.
One of the things I always found fascinating was, so I used to work in Wyoming, out in some of the old fields out there, and the flow rates that you get out of these wells might be a couple thousand barrels of fluid a day, right? For old oil wells. In geothermal, it's not uncommon to have a well producing like 100,000 barrels of fluid a day plus onshore geothermal wells, right? You might expect something like that from offshore oil and gas, but you have massive flow rates. So the well diameters are much larger, and the pumps that you put in a geothermal well, they're huge. They're like 13-inch diameter bowl pumps with 3,000 horsepower motors behind them. It's like sticking a locomotive down a well to pump up this volume of fluid, and it's insane, right? Really, really fascinating how much fluid is moving through those things.
Wow, that is definitely, I knew that there were higher flow rates. I didn't know that they were of that magnitude.
It's pretty cool.
That is crazy.
It's normally spec'd in gallons per second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish one of these wells that I invested in would be spec that way. That would be a nice turn of events. All right, so guys, give me the rundown. I've had Jamie Beard on the show before. I believe she is the leader of the Project InnerSpace revolution and stuff. She's been doing so much in the geothermal space. Can you guys give me a rundown on what Project InnerSpace is, and what's the goal and objective, and then what are y'all's roles in that?
Cool. You start then, Taylor.
Yeah, sure. So InnerSpace exists in the intersection between oil and gas and geothermal. The hardcore philosophy is that geothermal won't happen without oil and gas. Oil and gas has the people, the workforce, the technology, the experience, the footprint. I mean, it is the perfect institution and industry to be able to move forward into this geothermal space. And maybe the question is like, why InnerSpace, and why should oil and gas care? I mean, it's work, right? I think we all have gone through the rite of passage getting laid off in oil and gas. I mean, it happened to me. It really sucked, right? With when you start introducing a steady stream of work like geothermal to oil and gas companies, it's an insulator against the cyclic cycles that happens in downturns. And so that way, when you start to see oil prices fluctuate, you have geothermal there as an insulator, and that prevents the sort of fluctuation in jobs. So that's one of the things that oil and gas finds attractive. InnerSpace is here to help bridge oil and gas into geothermal, right? And so we're here to educate. We're here to help build those connections. We're here to help facilitate the transfer of technology from oil and gas into geothermal. We're doing a lot of work behind that with some government grants too. So that's the primary focus on what we're doing and the philosophy behind it, because we simply don't think that this technology space will take off without the involvement of everyone that is oil and gas.
Yeah, Jamie's quite the character, and when she initially kicked it all off with Pivot, that was just like a red rag to a bull for me. She just hit a nerve with me. It was so that passion that she had, and the passion to drive it from oil and gas, and that whole Pivot series, which was kind of the incubator that grew into Project InnerSpace, was fantastic. It really accelerated what was going on in the thinking process of, how can we deliver this green energy at high efficiency rates that make economic sense, so that we can all make some decent money on it. And that techno-economic story that loop's not closed yet. But I've been part of Project InnerSpace for a year now, and I had two big projects. One was as the task force chairman for technology transfer for drilling, so basically finding the biggest challenges in geothermal that oil and gas drillers could solve. So things like advanced drill bit design, which is doing great. Insulated pipe and low heat coefficient coatings for tubulars, high temperature cement, high temperature fluids. And we've worked with Taylor and Kate Voller were the leaders of that project for Geode, and it was really good getting a whole bunch of subject matter experts in from around the world and taking that journey. And I think that information, however the funding goes in the future, is super valuable for everybody in our industry, of seeing what a roadmap is from technology we use at 175 degrees to technology that we think is difficult at 425. But in this journey, we now know that 425C, 750F is doable. And everybody who's only ever drilled oil and gas wells goes, 750F? Yeah, it's actually not that difficult. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So that's the journey. The other one is I'm a dual citizen, US and UK, and I'm trying to get UK as excited as the US is on geothermal, and we're getting a couple of little wins here soon, and and hopefully we'll get that cracking as well. Take some of that North Sea expertise and put it to work on land in UK, where the guys can at least have a beer at night. Yeah.
The important things in life. All right, so go through. Tell me, you mentioned some of the big challenges that y'all already gone through. What were some of the big wins that y'all saw from being able to bring oilfield technology over to the geothermal space?
You want me to hit it?
Well, so I'll back up.
Yeah, you go, Taylor.
Yeah. What Tony mentioned was Geode. It's a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy. It's an acronym for Geothermal Energy from Oil and Gas Demonstrated Engineering. It's a $155 million grant that Project InnerSpace is the administrators of. And so we've created a roadmap that's going to be published in the next couple of months in 2025 here. That is a list of all of the technologies and methodologies that exist today in oil and gas. They're commercialized, where if they were adapted or tweaked, they could be ported over into geothermal and help expand that market and create wealth for everybody. So this roadmap brought together 157 different entities. Most of them are oil and gas operators, developers. There's a lot of academia, the U.S. national labs, international groups as well. but they've all signed on to this, right? And so they've been supporting this throughout this whole road mapping process for the last 8 months. And we're, like I said, we're just about to publish this roadmap that it comes out to maybe 30 different priority technologies that'll be focused on for this $150 million funding opportunity that starts to roll out through the next couple of years. Big takeaways. Tony, I'll kick it to you. What were the biggest ones that you came out with on the drilling side, at least?
Well, I'll go technology second. I'll go the big takeaway was the journey of the people on it. So we had this oil and gas posse. So service company people, manufacturers, oil and gas companies, and then some of the national lab people, and then some geothermal operators. Yeah. But the most amazing change was watching a group of operators who go, we can't do this. At the end of like 5 months going, oh, wow, that's actually not that difficult. And when someone shows up from a certain oil and gas company that has a big headquarters just south of the woodlands and whatever, and they're interested, you then know that this has suddenly become mainstream. You go, holy smoke, they're here? You go, what are you doing here at this meeting? You don't normally wait until like second, third, or fourth. Yeah. So that was really funny. But on the technology side, there is a combination of stuff that's coming out from service companies where if we think we can make a jump from 175C tools to 210, 220 relatively easily. Yeah. So that in people's minds, that doesn't get us to 400 degrees. But if you have a 210 tool that not surviving temperature, that's its operating temperature. For every 10 degrees C you go up or go down, your reliability doubles. So if you're 10 degrees lower, your reliability halves. If you're 10 degrees higher, it doubles. If we then combine that with insulation, big pipe, high flow rates, good well engineering, then we can deliver basically 200 degrees C fluid coming out of the bit, keep those tools below their operating temperature, even when we're drilling a 700F well. So, put it in F, we will have 400 degree F tools running in 700F tools, and the fluid coming down the middle of the pipe will be under 400F. Yeah. That's a game changer. Yeah. And when Schlumberger, Baker, and Halliburton go from, just thinking that it was a really tough problem to combining all those knowledgeable people in the room going that it actually isn't that difficult, that was a big jump. Yeah. So that's cool. Yeah.
So what were some of the biggest learnings there? Was this stuff that was coming from industry? Was it coming from the geothermal side or some of the people at the national labs?
So in industry on one side, yeah. So tool technology, you had some electronics capability that came out of national labs. The MIT Lincoln labs are looking at electronics for components in hyperspace speed tools that have to handle those sort of temperatures. You then put that inside a tool, it would accelerate that jump that a Schlumberger, Baker, Halliburton, Hefei need to do. And then on the things like chemistry, so cement, there's lots of work coming out the labs, the universities, in combination with the likes of the service companies being able to accelerate full-scale testing that shortens that time to market. And cement, as we've said, was one of basically the biggest challenges left, and had one of the highest priorities of it, because the problem with geothermal, or a challenge with geothermal, is the cement has to last 30 years. Yeah. So we really,
these wells produce for quite some time, correct?
Yeah. I mean, France, under Paris, the geothermal wells there were designed for 25 years. They've now been there for 50. Yeah. So they're heating Paris. Yeah. So, but as we push the boundaries techno-economically into really hot stuff, that corrosion, erosion, heating and cooling cycles, debonding, all of that becomes a bigger problem. Yeah.
Wow, it's a lot of fascinating stuff there. So we got a comment here from Robert. It says, it is the economic necessity for high flow rates that make the conversion of small diameter oil and gas wells to geothermal impractical. Thoughts?
That is actually a relatively fair statement. Yeah. We have looked at the industry has looked at the repurposing of oil and gas wells, and it is challenging from a flow rate. It's also challenging from the temperature. The objective in an oil and gas well is hydrocarbons. So the temperature gradient that, we try to avoid hot rock in oil and gas wells. We want something sitting there around 200 F. So, Robert's absolutely spot on. It is a challenging one. But again, if we're in the whole delivery business, then, we can make some new ones. Yeah.
But it's feasible. I mean, I think there's something like 500,000 oil and gas wells in Alberta, for instance, that have that are like P&A liabilities, right? And so they're pretty much, you're waiting to spend $100,000 to cap these wells. But if you're able to utilize some new technology to instead convert them into, a low volume heat producer, all of a sudden you've mitigated that P&A cost that you need to spend, and you could turn something that was a liability into, a reproducing asset. You have to pair it with like an off-taker on the surface. Greenhouses are a really great example for something like that. But yeah, I mean, I'd say I agree with Tony. Like it is fair, right? You have to produce higher volumes of hot water in order to justify the cost of the wells, and that makes sense, right? That's why you're talking about orders of magnitude more water out of these things.
But we might be able to use them as part of a fractured pair or a fractured triplet. So having that well, maybe it's the injector, yeah, and we drill 2 other wells beside it, and then use that infrastructure to basically frack between that rock for a different reason. Our only problem is if we're fracking in an oil and gas reservoir, then we've still got separation issues of separating the hot water with the remaining bits of oil. What we could do is reuse some of these dense areas of shale production and sidetrack out of them deeper into a brine reservoir, potentially below. But again, we probably have to do a sidetrack out of the 9 5/8. So it depends on well design. So it definitely isn't a no, but it isn't a straightforward what we'd all dream of, with all these hundreds of thousands of holes into the ground, into the heat. Why can't we use them?
Yeah.
And it isn't straightforward. Yeah.
And no one ever said that you can't co-produce oil and gas along with geothermal, right? I mean,
No.
the last time I checked, there's some projects by Ecopetrol in South America where they're looking at co-production of oil and gas and geothermal, and looking to use the low volumes. It's not really a low volume. I mean, it's a decent volume of heat coming from their fluid stream to power their infield production, right? So you're pretty much just having a natural power source out in the middle of nowhere. Otherwise, you'd have to tank in diesel or utilize something else to power your pumps and power the rest of your like production facilities out in these remote areas. But hey, you can utilize geothermal and like a portable turbine. All of a sudden, you've got a little self-contained unit for producing your fuels.
So from a monetary perspective or economic perspective, how much has oil and gas technology in the last couple of years been able to move the needle to make these wells go from not being profitable to profitable, right? Because essentially within oil and gas, we're looking at, what's the price per barrel, right? What's our Henry Hub price for natural gas? It seems more so from what I've taken in, that on the geothermal side, it's, we got to be able to reduce the cost of, what it takes to be able to drill these wells and be able to, as Tony, you said, deliver a hole in the ground. How much have we been able to move that needle in the past couple of years with everything that you are talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Dave. And that if you say the biggest change has been this speed jump from 30 feet an hour to 100 feet an hour. Okay, so you're all of a sudden saying that this rig with its spread rate being on location is there for 1/3 of the time compared to what it was just 2 years ago. And that is thickness of diamond, strength of diamond, leach cutters, shape cutters, diamond blade design, everything that's gone into making these cutters at 2 million psi, and combining that with a drilling optimization process that the guys at Texas A&M pushed into the Forge project. Sam Neuert and Fred Dupriest, who are quite familiar, the industry is quite familiar with. The secret sauce was a combination of the two. Yeah, so you took oil and gas knowledge, combined it with oil and gas technology. So that was a jump in speed. When you started, you said it in a really interesting way, is in barrels. Yeah, so I was doing some homework for the Clean Air Task Force the other day, and I said, if we're going to present to an oil and gas leader in a major oil and gas company, we've got to convert geothermal speak into barrels. Yeah. And return on investment. And it was really interesting. We converted down what we call a super hot rock well, which is up in the high 650, 700 degrees. When you looked at that, the equivalent energy you would get out of it. So you would say spend 50, 60 million on a pair of wells. That's an expensive land well, yeah. But the energy you would get out of it is equivalent of 7 shale wells drilled back to back in their depletion curves, yeah. So if they're like 7 or 8 million, the money in the end is about the same spent. When we got down to the return on investment, one was about 180% and one was about 210% over 25 years life of that asset. So it was producing in an energy equivalent of 200, 250 barrels of oil coming out of the geothermal well. And it was lasting 25 years, but it cost 5 times as much. So then you go, well, the economics are okay, let's get out there. That is, relatively at the cutting edge of geothermal. Super hot rock, you get a massive energy uplift when you start drilling what they call supercritical water, which is above 375 degrees centigrade. The amount of energy captured in that fluid is huge. It's like a nuclear reactor, a man-made natural nuclear reactor. So, but the geothermal economics will be improved just the same as shale. That journey that we took when George Mitchell stood and told us that we can frack the source rock and get oil out of it, and we all went, nah, we're not going to do that. Yeah. And then 15 years later, we're the largest producer of oil and gas on the planet. Yeah. I think that journey will be had. We'll be drilling these granites at 150, 200 foot an hour. We'll get a lot of heat out of the ground. We'll work out how to frack it. We'll work out how to cement it in place reliably and for longevity. We'll find coatings for the pipe, and we'll produce another energy source that lasts us 30, 40 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the shale revolution changed everything in oil and gas, right? It also changed everything in geothermal. So the example I'll give you is there's a group out there. They're still considered a startup, but they're called Fervo Energy, if no one's ever heard of them. And they're a couple of ex-oil and gas guys that started this geothermal startup. The principle is they're drilling a couple laterals, fracking them, and then circulating the water in a hot reservoir, and then they produce this man-made geothermal reservoir. But they published a paper recently between the first wells that they drilled and then the most recent wells they drilled. In applying oil and gas technology and methodology, they've reduced their costs between these two wells by 70%. That's a massive energy savings and cost savings by deploying what's commercialized today in oil and gas into this new application of geothermal. And it's still going down, right? So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to keep leveraging what's already been done in one space and just moving it to another space and drilling more holes in the ground.
And they're further at about 220 now, and they're doing what they say on the tin every single day. Then as they go 220, 230, 240, and just take that learning curve, like we did in shale, we just did 1 mile laterals, then we did 2 mile laterals, then we did 3 mile laterals, and then we were knocking out wells in the Eagleford from spud to TD in a monobore in 4.5 days, you know, and we'll do the same. The other, what I want the audience though to feel is that it doesn't just have to be electricity, you know. A huge amount of the energy that we consume in the world is for heat, yeah. And like a well that I'm looking at the moment for a large hospital complex, you're looking at just 2 directional wells, 9,000 foot deep into hot sedimentary brine. You got an up dip well and a down dip well. Your up dip well is your injector or your disposal well. Your down dip well, you put an ESP pump in it. You crank on the ESP pump with a 9 5/8 shoe. You suck out of these reservoirs that have got decent porosity and permeability, but nothing I've said in that statement is unusual for an oil and gas crew. What's unusual is we have to come up with a new cool rig that is green, quiet, doesn't wake up the patients at night, slips into a hospital car park, drills a hole, and leaves 4 days later before the nurses change shift. Yeah, and that's cool that we've actually got a chance to go out and design some new rigs that can do stuff like that. Can we run it with 4 people? You know, stuff like that. Can the DD be remote, or does he need to be on location? But all that stuff we were doing in automation in oil and gas, how can we apply that to urban drilling for heat? Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity for lots of new ideas. Yeah.
So I got 2 questions here before I forget. So what's the, per se, the decline curve on one of these, I guess, naturally producing geothermal wells? You know, is it the 100,000 barrels a day for straight for 20 years, or are we looking at some of the same decline curves that we would see in a conventional oil and gas well?
Good. That's not a straightforward question, but I'll try and answer it as fast as I can. If it's hydrothermal, so that means you're drilling into rock with faults and fractures that are producing basin water out at pressure. Those wells will deplete. Some will not deplete at all. Like Ladarello in Italy has been going for 100 years now, or Coso, which is a site in California, is the wells are starting to struggle. They're drying out. Yeah, so those are not man-made geothermal wells, other than the well itself. The fluid is coming out naturally. When we look at what we call reservoir independent geothermal, sorry, non-independent geothermals, as in we just drill into hot rock and we fracture between them, the depletion on that is the heat in the rock. So on one of those, depending on the depth and the temperature, you may only have a 20% depletion over 30 years. Yeah, the same water, you'll be losing a tiny bit from evaporation, but relatively the same water is closed looping around that. So you're pumping down through the fractures, back up the other side, and pulling the heat. Rock is a very poor conductor, so you will suck out of the near bore if you pump too hard. But you can find an optimum flow rate, balance that with the density of the fractures you have and the flow rate, and maximize either longevity or short-term production. So it can be a trade. Yeah.
Excellent. Now I forgot what my other question was. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll look at some of the comments that we got in here. Robert said the high temperature electronics breakthroughs at national labs recently are primarily in packaging or in a few low density components. There's still a shortage of long life, high density silicone processes. Any thoughts?
I'll tell a story on that. So I, about 5 or 6 years ago, I looked at trying to make chips. Do you remember we NOV and we started we had little hockey pucks with vibration sensors in. Yeah. So it's a tiny little chip. It's about the size of my pinky fingernail. Yeah. So we looked at doing that with exotic materials from the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado, ALGAN, which is basically the material that's used in chips in nuclear weapons. So it lasts about 10 milliseconds before the chip fries. Yeah, but it has to last at those temperatures. Yeah, we just saw no path forward to commerciality for those chips. What we have seen, though, as Robert said, is yes, packaging and getting the heat away from the chips is really important. So elevating the chip temperature is a good step, but how you remove the heat from those chips, the heat that they generate themselves. And then in meetings in MIT and with the national lab that's attached to it. What's up, Taylor? What's that called? It's gone out of my head.
Lincoln Labs.
Lincoln Labs. Lincoln Labs.
Oh,
There,
with
they were,
Sandia. Oh.
yeah, they're looking at. So really, the chip work is Sandia, NREL, Lincoln Labs for different reasons, but fully depleted silica definitely has the potential of not costing $1 million a chip, costing a reasonable amount of money, but getting us to 550F chips.
Yeah, I think it's called fully depleted silicon and insulator technology, right? That's probably where the future direction is going to go with when it comes to high temperature electronics. You know, not talking about the packaging side of things. The problem, I think, I wouldn't say maybe it's a problem. The challenge, though, is there aren't too many chip producers, at least in the U.S., that are able to actually produce those types of chips, right? And so, yeah, it's just something that has to be solved for, and figuring out, you know, what the capabilities are there, and actually being able to produce those once you have some prototypes that are available to work at these temperatures.
And the other problem is you most chip manufacturers that, you know, they want to make 1 billion chips that go in these, and they go, oh, how many will you MWD boys need? Oh, well, we'll need about 1,000, and they'll go, well, yeah, if I deliver, I've got to divide 5 billion by 1,000 to get how much the chip's going to cost. Yeah, so you know that journey's tougher on the economics of number that you need. The other problem is as well is you need high temperature electrics in the tool as well as electronics. Yeah, so it's what's the coating on the windings in the electric motors that are driving the pulsers or the turbines. You know, there's all that componentry as well as the electronics. But one thing we are looking at, and I'm working on a project with one of my customers at the moment, is cryo flasking the tool. So you can have a tool, you have a high temperature tool, but you basically have a source of super cooled metal that's been cooled in liquid nitrogen inside the collar, and that is heat sinking with the electronics. So that could give you potentially 100 hours of cooling in a fluid environment that's way higher than the temperature of the tool. So there's some pretty good innovation coming out of that on some of the MWD companies and a couple of little startups around the world on that. But yeah,
I actually know those guys really well over at Norwegian Well.
there you go. Yeah, exactly them. Yeah, you said their name, I didn't. Perfect. Yeah.
No. Well, there's a reason why I said their name. So a little plug for myself. So one of the questions I wanted to be able to go back to that I remember now, where, as far as like basins, right? So we've got the Permian Basin, we've got the Eagleford, Haynesville, right? We've got a lot of oil and gas basins. What are the areas, what are the basins that we might be looking at that could be, the hot drilling spots? Like, what's going to be the Midland, right, for geothermal?
That's a good one. I mean, geothermal isn't necessarily going to be restricted to the types of basins that you might connect to with oil and gas. I mean, there certainly are a couple oil and gas basins that could co-produce geothermal. Eagleford is one of them. I mean, you mentioned a few other ones, but when you're looking at where is geothermal drilling happening frequently today, it's along the tectonic plate boundaries around the world. So like coastal California is a good example. Anywhere where you have volcanoes, like Iceland and Italy are classic examples. Turkey, in set like, I don't know, Western U.S. around Wyoming and Nevada. These are all like synonymous with high temperature. Where the future is going, though, is the ambiguous term of geothermal anywhere, right? Anywhere you go, anywhere you're at, wherever you're sitting at, there's heat below your feet. It's just a matter of how deep you need to get there, how deep you have to go in order to get access to it. And so the idea is, hey, if we have the right technology and we can economically reach that resource and produce the energy from it, we now have geothermal resource wherever the demand is for heating, cooling, or power generation. And so that's where a lot of the technologies that are in development today by startups are targeting, and some of the stuff that Tony's working on, which is just going as deep as possible and reaching these super critical temperatures where you have really high energy density and you can produce massive amounts of energy on demand as a baseload energy source, like wherever you need it. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, so the basin that jumps up already that has got a project later on this year is under the DJ basin. Yeah, so there is a well planned down to, I believe, 18 or 19,000 feet TVD under the DJ. So at about 9,000-10,000 feet, you run out the sedimentary basin and you go into the basement rocks that basically the mineral belt of Colorado's in. So once you get down into that basement, the temperature gradient carries on that you have temperatures over 550 F in that well, and so that's under that basin. So exactly as Taylor was saying, we have heat at depth. The lower the temperature gradient, the deeper you have to go to get that. If you look at Alaska, which was a big oil and gas province, you look at Augustine Island in the Cook Inlet. Alaska and the Cook Inlet is running out of natural gas. Yeah, but you have a volcano in the middle of the Cook Inlet that the temperature goes up 200 degrees C per 1,000 meters. Yeah, so that's 200 degrees C per 3,000 feet, or 300 F by whatever you want to. It's a serious temperature gradient. Yeah, so we're looking at putting a rig on a barge and running it across onto the side of Augustine Island, and you could drill a whole batch of wells that could power Alaska for the next 30 years. Yeah, but when you talk about just normal oil and gas basins, Project InnerSpace have a really valuable tool called GeoMap. Yeah, and GeoMap has lots of layers in which have like the temperature of what you've got in the rock, but it's also you can overlay where the people are. So when you start looking at oilfield basins where you have people, then you start to look at places like the Wilcox, which is deep in the ground under Houston. So can we use the Wilcox to produce heat in the winter and cooling in the summer to something like the Texas Medical Center or University of Texas or Texas A&M, large facility like that? That's where you're going to see more of the normal oil and gas depth, speeds, and everything done into some of those would have been oil reservoirs, but they were water wet. They're full of brine. Yeah. So, and there's lots of places like that around the world. Germany, the Dutch have been heating all their greenhouses by drilling the Rotliegends, which is an oil and gas reservoir in the southern North Sea, but they're using it for hot water to let us all have tulips all year round. Yep.
It's beautiful. I've been to the Tulip Festival. It's great. So how important then is, because like when I think of like a drill bit, right, I don't see as that piece of technology having a problem with high temperature limits, right? I think of it just being more MWD. So is MWD the bottleneck in being able to make sure that we're placing the wells in the right location so that we have the electronics and everything down hole so that we can, is that one of the big bottlenecks? Or is it, is it, mud motors, or like we said, is it the bits? Is there something else in the BHA assembly that's really being hampered by the high heat?
It's a little bit of all the above. And Tony is definitely the expert on this for sure, and I'll kick it to him, right? But there's some interesting prototypes that have happened recently, and some tech development in that space that ranges from the mud motors to the MWD to the bits, right? And so let's say that the mud motors, right? One of the high temperature prototypes that's out there right now is an all metal motor, right? So instead of having like a elastomer stator and your stainless steel rotor, it's actually a metal to metal motor, right? And so that's able to go up to higher temperatures for geothermal. You have issues that we already talked about with like the electronics and some prototypes that have been developed and are being developed for your MWD systems. But then also on the bits, there are some temperature limits to a lot of what is stock in oil and gas today when it comes to like the bearings and the bits. But I think the major thing that's holding back bits right now is the life of the bit, right? When you're drilling into these harder rocks, you're going to be tripping a lot more at deeper depths because your bits could be wearing down a lot faster. So there's been some demonstrations recently that really haven't changed the ROP that the bit's able to output in these harder rock demonstrations, but it's actually doubled the life of the bit, right? And that's a huge cost savings, because if you double the life of the bit, and that's what's failing the most in your BHA, you're really stretching out your capex a lot further, because you're not having to trip, right? You have to spend a full day tripping in and out once you need to replace your bit. On the forward technology side of things, and this is where I'll kick it to Tony because it gets really cool, is it's the category of what I call your non-traditional bit technology. So it's utilizing other means besides just like high torque, high weight on bit in order to remove the rock. And there's some really fascinating areas of development between using like high velocity particle bit drilling or jet drilling. So there's some startups using plasma or electropulse. I forget what it's called. It's pretty much like using high voltage pulse to shatter the rock.
Millimeter wave, yeah.
No, millimeter wave is even different than that.
Yeah.
But so I don't know. Where do you think, Tony, with
yeah? So
with
you got three categories, Dave. You got taking the regular oilfield bits and making them bulletproof in a geothermal environment, and that progression of diamond technologies has done a hockey stick in the last few years, because basically Chinese presses took US cutters, US synthetic, United Diamond, they're all making cutters in China where they compress them at 2 million psi. So that jump in made a big difference there. The second category is taking those products but doing something secondary with them. So we had some bits that we tested in Texas a couple of years ago out in the quarry just north of Austin in the pink granite that the capital of Texas is made of. And that straight out of the bat did 50 foot an hour, firing 12 million steel shot a minute out of it. So it was a cannon with PDC reamer on the side. Yeah. We seeing the impact of, if we can cool the fluid, if we can pump, basically frozen margarita down the well, slushy, and it is coming. If we can keep it super cool when it comes out the bit, and the rock is at 500 F, the crystalline structure starts to crack. Yeah, it's just like dropping an ice cube into a coffee cup. Yeah, so the rock is weakened by being hit by cold water. Yeah. Flipping it the other way is if you have a regular PDC drill bit, but you put plasma, so you put anodes and cathodes on the front of the bit, and you have a downhole alternator, and you shock electric current into the formation, you can do the opposite, overheat the rock and shatter it. Yeah. The third group is the basically brand new technology, which is melting rock with plasma or blasting the hell out of rock with microwaves. Yeah. Which is millimeter wave and plasma. The oilfield bits, technical readiness level 9, ready to go. The middle bunch are more technical readiness 7, 8, 9, and then the new technology, plasma and millimeter wave, that's really in a technical readiness level of 4 and 5. And okay. all of those categories are going on at the moment. Yeah, there's people working on all of those. Yeah. The challenge for groups 2 and 3 is the blooming mechanical bit guys are just getting so good that they're raising the bar every week. And as Taylor said, if they're not increasing the ROP, they're increasing an extra 1,000 foot on a bit run. Yeah. Are we going to get to geothermal where it's one section, one run? That's a little ways off yet. But
those guys are plug and play too.
I'll never say never. Yeah.
Like if you're going to develop new cutters for a bit, you don't really need to have any adaptations to your rig or to the top size to be able to manage it. With some of the other tech, if you're trying to generate plasma, you need a whole nother set of surface equipment in order to produce that amount of power on the surface. If you're trying to hammer it with microwaves, you have to have like a huge, I think it's what it called, not a megatron, it's a gyrotron, right?
Gyrotron, yeah.
Imagine trying to stick a lightsaber into the ground to drill a hole. So it requires a different type of architecture on the surface, and so it's a little harder to just utilize the existing footprint that oil and gas already brings to the surface. When instead you're just plugging out, a new bit that has different cutters or better life to it.
So through some of these developments, have y'all seen a reverse in the technology handover, things that have been developed for geothermal that have then gone back to be able to help drill wells in the Haynesville?
One giant one, yeah. So a Canadian geothermal company drilling in Germany at the moment came to NOV and said, we really need to keep our fluid cool in the wellbore. Can you guys look at a regular oil field coating and see if you can make it really insulative, even though it's thin? And Tubo came out with a set of low heat coefficient coatings. And I would guess that, so the regular coating is 0.83 watts per meter Kelvin. The new low heat coefficient coating called Draken is 0.15 watts per meter Kelvin. So it's very insulative, but it's not particularly thick. That coating has been hardly used in geothermal because there's not very many wells. And now I believe there's 500,000 feet of it going into the Haynesville and all the hot oilfield plays in South Texas, because basically all the operators were frying MWD tools, and now the fluid temperatures drop from 180 down to 145 and stuff, and everyone's not melting tools anymore. So that's definitely one that's gone the other way. What will probably happen pretty quick is stuff that you have to do in cement will have such a benefit for oil and gas on longevity, strength, better bonding materials to steel, because if we have to do it at really elevated temperatures, the lower temperature version of that product will probably be really robust and strong.
So to your question, David, I would say that everything that I have seen that's developed by the oil and gas industry for geothermal has actually had a major impact on the reliability of the oil and gas tech portfolio. I mean, I can name off a few examples, right? Like I used to run the technology strategy for Baker Hughes and geothermal. And so, if you develop something that increases the reliability of your geothermal ESP, and brings it up to be able to produce a higher temperature, whatever those subcomponents are that you upgraded in order to get to that higher temperature, they were always then put back into your oil and gas portfolio because it increased the reliability of your pumps. It's the same for all the electronics when you develop these for your MWDs. It was the same for all of your bits. Hey, if you develop something that doubles the life of your bit, why in the world wouldn't you use it for oil and gas? Because it's also going to double the life of those bits, right? So there is an example I can't think of where something was developed that was pushing the boundaries for geothermal. Higher temperature, deeper, better reliability. That wasn't then, plugged back in to make the core portfolio better. What was really challenging about that, though, was generating the business cases behind it and trying to figure out, like, okay, if I invest $1 million into geothermal technology X, how do I actually compare that business case, and the returns for it when I'm investing something that's, mainly designed for oil and gas? Because it's really hard to figure out that dollar value when it comes to reliability increase of the core portfolio when you develop something for high temperature. And there's always a bit of a struggle, when it comes to the financing of geothermal tech development. But without question, it developing tech for geothermal pushed the limits of the tech's capabilities, and it increased the reliability of the oil and gas portfolio every single time.
I mean, it's fascinating to hear, just because I've seen so much of almost like a stall out in research and development on oil and gas drilling side specifically, right? Because of the manufacturing style of drilling. It's like, well, we need to go faster, we need to do this, but at the same time, there's not a reinvestment. And obviously consolidation in the industry, mergers and acquisitions is not helping the service companies be able to make the higher margins that they need to be able to reinvest. So it's cool to be able to see that. It almost feels like, to me, like the leading edge of drilling technology is going to be geothermal.
I reckon that's a fair statement. And as someone who was a directional driller and saw the transition from motors to rotary steerable, and then saw the impact of PDC bits relative to roller cones, and then drilling automation and controls and remote directional drilling and all of that, to jump into geothermal, it's that same feeling as it was back in those transitions. Is that excitement of, as a rotary steerable guy, persuading someone to switch from motors to rotary steerable and suddenly drilling the well in 30-40% faster. That is what is going on in geothermal at the moment. Almost every day is new stuff. We sometimes say we're not on the cutting edge of technology, we're on the bleeding edge. It is out on the limits all the time. And that is cool.
It kind of feels like the mid 2000s.com era.
Exactly.
For geothermal. You're going into like this major step change of an industry, and the people that get in now and the people that get in soon and go in heavy, these are the people that are really going to be outstanding and make a lot of money. I mean, I think that within the next 10-20 years, we're going to have like the first trillionaires coming out of geothermal, right? With the scale that this place is growing, and like the amount of technology that's coming into it and the rate that it's growing, it's gonna explode, because if you're a country that's dependent on importing your fossil fuels, you're really going to be keen on trying to get a localized energy source. So this is a lot of Europe, this is a lot of like South America, and so that translates to people working in oil and gas today having a really interesting growth trajectory, and to be able to move to do work in different countries and be able to locate to places where they wouldn't traditionally think that they could apply their skill sets. Like how many people might think that they'd be drilling in Croatia in a couple of years from now? I'll tell you what, it's actually going on right now. It's just an example of where this can take you.
Yeah, I mean, the lucky thing with geothermal is for all those, if anyone online is the guys that work out in the oilfield basins around the world, geothermal, funny enough, seems to be in places like Hawaii and St. Kitts and St. Nevis and California and Iceland. It's
Switzerland.
I have to submit my tax return and put my expenses down, and it all looks like I'm going to a bunch of beach resorts. But it's all the places where hot water is. It's volcanoes and tropical islands, and but it is urban as well. And that's cool. We can we're going to be able to do a lot of this from home. So
it's certainly a lot more scenic than the Permian.
See, that's what I was asking earlier. Is like Honolulu going to be the new Midland, but for geothermal
than Saudi Arabia and Nigeria as well.
All right, guys, we'll get close here to be able to wrap up the show. Any last words that you guys would like to be able to share with our majority oil and gas audience? What would you like to be able to leave them with?
I'll go. You finish then. I'll let you have the last word, Taylor. So one big thing, when I switched over, once I realized that it was going to be real, it brought to me a massive amount of excitement that the generation that comes along behind me have 50, 100 years of drilling ahead of them. that's geologists, that's guys working on rigs, that's service company hands, that's you know, surface installation people. You know, it is going to give us a full life. We got to re-engage with all the universities and get people back studying earth sciences and mechanical engineering and drilling. You know, I said to UT and Texas A&M, you need to put in not a petroleum engineering class, or keep that, but put a drilling engineering class in that's specifically for drilling engineering for the next 5 years, and do oil and gas drilling and geothermal drilling as part of the class. And the answer I got that really surprised me was they were already building it. Yeah. So to the audience, you know, this is real. It will be economically viable, just like shale, what, you know, made that journey. And futures may look a little shaky right this minute, but they're gonna be good in a few years' time. Yeah. Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, so Tony and I, we talk about the switch. You know, we made the switch from oil and gas to geothermal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a switch. I mean, there's
No.
no one that's saying you could only do one. You like the expertise there, it's like you're bilingual. You know, you can do both. You can do one or the other. You know, we made the switch because once you get a taste of it, it's awesome. I mean, it's a fun space. You're deploying all sorts of new and novel technologies in new areas, you know, around the world, and it's just a really, really exciting thing. So, you know, you could stay in both, but once you get that flavor, you know, your lips start to tingle. And it's like, that's all I want to do, right? I mean, it's a whole set of new challenges using the skills that you already developed and the skills that you already have, but it's fresh and it's exciting. I mean, I love it. It's very fulfilling, and you know, I think that a lot of people that start to look into geothermal and get curious about it have the same sort of sentiment.
Excellent, guys. Well, thank you both, Taylor, Tony. Thank you guys both so much for being on the show today. I, you know, learned a lot, and you know, I'm absolutely fascinated by all of the new technology that's coming into the drilling space. And it really doesn't matter to me whether it's geothermal, just oil and gas, or drilling from hydrogen or helium, whatever. I just like drilling. It's so much fun, and it's great to hear that there's so many new people that are getting interested in you know, putting a hole in the ground, and the fact that, you know, that technology can go from, you know, one side to the other and vice versa. I think it's a great step forward for the industry and all of us that are here. So, with that said, let me give away a drill bit real quick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really, really, really do appreciate it. Share screen, StreamYard giveaway, share, come back over here, put that on the screen, back over here. All right, we'll do the drawing. Once again, and then I should say, next week we've got Demetrios from Weatherford is going to be coming on the show. The week after that, Robert Van Kulenberg, and then no show. I'll be in Norway. Oh, Grant is our winner for the day. Thank you, Grant. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, myself or Tracy, and what we will do is get you one of these 3D printed drill bits on its way to you. Like I said, March 7th, no show. I will be in Norway. Also meeting with the guys from Norwegian Well while I'm there. And then March 14th, Eric Caillou. So there we go. Once again, thank you guys so much. We almost need to do a round 2. There's so many more questions and everything, and maybe we should just do another update in a few short months after you guys come out with your roadmap.
I think there's a bunch of changes. It's moving so fast. You could do it every quarter. Not a problem.
Yeah. I wore my favorite shirt today. It says the future of drilling is hot. You know, so it's the truth.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, tuning in. Please be back again next week. That's it from me. And as always, know your industry.